This week, I had the great honor of speaking with students at the Tecnológico de Monterrey in Mexico City about democracy, immigration, and civic participation. I shared the stage with former President Vicente Fox, with whom I have worked for many years, and every time we appear together at a forum like this, I'm reminded why public service is still worth the effort. When the event ended, several students came up with questions. One stopped me and she said, Dr. Hernández, do you really believe our generation can still change anything? I told her, yes, of course. But I also told her that more and more young people are asking me that same question. And that really concerns me. Not because young people are unaware of what is happening in Mexico. On the contrary, I think that they understand very well what is happening. And that is precisely why they distrust the system. Disillusionment, when it becomes permanent, I believe, can paralyze an entire society. And when good people walk away from public life, others fill that space. We have seen it happen over and over in different countries. That is why I dedicated much of my talk to the year 2000. Not as an exercise in nostalgia, but because there is something from that moment that still matters today. There was a time in Mexico when millions believed participation would change nothing. Many felt that everything had already been decided in advance. We'd had a government for 71 years with the same party. And yet something happened that very few expected. Millions of citizens pushed together, and the country experienced a political transformation that changed the mindset of an entire generation. It was not simply an election. It was people acting because they believed something larger than a political party or an election was at stake. The first official act of President Vicente Fox's administration was to welcome the immigrant community, those immigrant leaders from the United States. He welcomed them to Los Pinos. It was not just symbolic, it was giving them recognition. You are part of Mexico, he was saying. Not only those who live here, but also those who live beyond our borders. Because Mexico is a transnational nation. It does not stop at its geographic borders. Mexico also lives in LA, Chicago, Dallas, Houston, and in millions of homes where families preserve the language, the traditions, and a profound love for Mexico. I spent many years working closely with those communities in the United States and still do. Alongside other migration scholars, we have written books. We've documented these realities in academic and public policy work that seeks to give context and meaning to what is too often reduced just to statistics. What I keep saying was not just a social problem. I see people working double shifts, facing discrimination, living with uncertainty, and still sending money home to their families while building opportunities for their children through sacrifices most of us can barely even imagine. The Latino community in the United States now generates approximately $4.1 trillion, and Mexicans and Mexican Americans play a central role in that economic force. At the same time, remittances sent home by Mexicans abroad now surpass international tourism and foreign direct investment combined in Mexico. Behind those numbers are mothers who did not see their children grow up, and fathers who crossed the desert so their families could have something better. That first democratic transition that government with Vicente Fox left behind, I believe, concrete achievements. For example, the Presidential Office for Mexicans Abroad, institutional recognition of migrant communities as a living part of Mexico, and after decades of waiting, the right of Mexicans abroad to vote. And that work should not end here. Today, it should continue through efforts such as the organization Alma de Mexico, a civil society that brings together other organizations committed to Mexico, not through partisan politics, but through the conviction that Mexico's greatest strength is its people, both inside and outside the borders. When I finished speaking at the Tecnológico, the students kept asking questions. And to be honest, that mattered more to me than their applause. And to the young woman who asked whether her generation can still change anything, I say again to her what I told her just a couple of days ago. Democracy is not a permanent achievement. Every generation must defend it in its own way, using the tools and spaces available to them. Mexico today needs critical young people, yes, but it also needs young people willing to stay engaged in politics, remain in the conversation, and help build from within. Now, young man, young lady, it's your turn to decide what role you want to play in that story. I invite you to read my entire article in El Sol de Mexico this week. Thank you very much.